The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch. Chapter 30. No Comfort. Livid came around several huts and found two girls in front of her house. The taller of the two was standing on a stool stretching up to hang something over Livid's door while the slightly shorter girl supervised. Both were beautiful, but the taller one's face was rounder, and she moved with less grace. However, they shared long black braided hair and pale brown eyes. They were also different from the other villagers in that they had creamy brown skin and a splash of freckles over the bridges of their noses and across their cheeks.
"It's crooked,"
the supervisor growled.
"What mischief are you playing at now, Oleander?"
Livid said accusingly while crossing her arms. At the sound of the gray maiden's voice, the taller girl jumped off the stool and spun around with surprise in her big pale brown eyes. On the other hand, Oleander snarled briefly and then coolly put on a hurt expression as she turned to face Livid. Raising her chin defiantly, she replied,
"So that's the thanks we get. Here we are trying to decorate your house to welcome you home, and all you do is yell at us."
She pouted and pointed at the banner.
"See for yourself, it says, 'Welcome home.'"
The gray shepherdess eyed the banner skeptically, but the strange, scribbled marks meant nothing to her.
"Oh, yeah,"
the shorter girl gasped with feigned embarrassment while covering her mouth with her hand.
"We forgot you can't read, didn't we, Nettle?"
The taller girl nodded with an odd grin.
"Yeah, we forgot no one ever bothered to teach you."
The shepherdess narrowed her gray eyes at them.
"When have you two ever done anything like this before?"
"Here we are trying to make peace with you.
Oleander whined.
But if you're going to be like that, we'll just leave."
With that, the two girls marched away displaying hurt feelings upon their pretty creamy brown faces.
"I put Dawdle in a stable, and I gave her some grain,"
Jaunty announced as he strolled up. Glancing at the departing girls, he frowned.
"What did Oleander and Nettle want?"
Hearing their names, the two girls paused and looked back over their shoulders at the boy. In response, Jaunty stuck out his tongue. Seeing this, Oleander and Nettle both rolled their eyes and continued off in a huff.
"They were putting up this banner to welcome me home,"
Livid explained, while gesturing at the decorative cloth that still hung crookedly over her door. Jaunty looked doubtful.
"When have they ever welcomed you home?"
"That's what I said,"
the gray maiden replied with a smirk.
"Well, what's it say?"
the boy asked, while eyeing the banner's strange marks. Livid only shrugged and went into her house. After one last suspicious glance at the banner, Jaunty followed close behind. That night, Livid struggled to go to sleep. She lay for a long time looking up at the rafters of her house. Similar to all the other huts, these wooden beams were arranged in a circle like a huge pinwheel, and it reminded the gray shepherdess of the swirling clouds in her nightmares.
"Why do I keep having the same dream?"
she whispered to herself. Turning onto her side, she glanced around within the one-room house. There was a small clay stove in the middle of the hut, and an amber glow came from the fire that crackled within it. On the other side of the stove, Jaunty lay in his own bed. His rhythmic breathing told her that he was fast asleep. Livid sighed, and for a long time she just gazed into the fire. However, as is often the case, she finally fell asleep without knowing it, and so she found herself within the land of dreams yet again. Like before, Livid stood upon the pinnacle of the same black tower in the midst of the furious sea. The storm swirled above her head, and from deep within, lightning illuminated the ominous clouds. The gray maiden was standing with her back to the sea as she watched the witch take the golden baby from the noble woman's trembling hands. Quickly turning, the witch hurried toward Livid, But as she came, the shepherdess realized that she was no longer holding the beautiful golden child. Still coming, the witch glared directly at the gray shepherdess.
You shouldn't be here. You should be in the sea.
The gray witch hissed angrily. And then, with more power than the small woman appeared to possess, the witch shoved Livid over the parapet. Panic gripped the gray maiden as she plummeted toward the crashing waves. Down she fell, and as she tumbled, she noticed a huge serpentine shadow moving beneath the swelling sea. Still tumbling head over feet, she flipped around again to see the stormy sky, and there she beheld a pale golden light piercing the dark clouds. It stood out in sharp contrast against the blackness of the night. Once more, Livid tumbled around just in time to see the dark waves racing upwards to swallow her. Protectively crossing her gray arms in front of her colorless face, she braced for the impending impact. But the impact never came. Livid jerked awake with a gasp of terror. Shuddering, her gray eyes darted around the room, searching for the convulsing sea that seemed always hungry to devour her. However, she only found the inside of the hut and the small clay stove. The fire no longer crackled within it, for now it was only glowing coals. Jaunty was still sleeping in his narrow bed, and a pale shaft of moonlight was shining through one of the windows. With a groaning sigh, she rolled over to go back to sleep, but she could find no rest in that soft bed. Pulling on her outer garment, she quietly crept out of the house. Hours later, Jaunty was up with the rising of the sun, and he did not seem overly surprised to find Livid's bed empty. Frying a few eggs in a skillet on the clay stove, he spooned them out onto a couple of pieces of flatbread. Eating one, as he left the house, he carried the other over to the stable. With only one hand, he carefully climbed onto one of the stall's doors and peered down inside. There, in the straw, he found Livid peacefully sleeping against Dawdle's round belly.
I brought you some breakfast,
He exclaimed cheerfully.